Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Today we're going to be talking about how to get more out of your reading as a writer. Active reading is probably one of the best ways to improve as a writer. It's advice that you'll hear over and over. If you want to become a better writer, then read. And to be honest, it's a piece of advice that I can't find any fault with. Reading avidly, but more important, actively, is one of the best ways to improve as a writer, because it lets you see techniques in application rather than just in the abstract context. If you're ever trying to improve in a certain technique or area, looking for that thing in what you read is, apart from actually writing it in your own work, probably the best way to improve. Unlike something like just reading an article about writing craft, which is a passive way of learning how to write, reading is an active way of learning how to write. So actively engaging with what you read and getting more out of what you read is really important. So today I'm going to be sharing a few ways that you can get more out of your reading. So it's not about increasing the amount that you read, but rather the quality of your reading. Tip number 1, write book reviews. You don't have to post these anywhere if you don't want to. They can just be for you. But after you read a book, taking just 10 minutes to write a quick review and a quick summary of your thoughts will be invaluable. Just taking that time to physically write out what you thought worked, what you thought didn't work, why it worked and why it didn't work is going to be really helpful for really cementing in your mind what you learned from this book. If you just read a book and then once you're done you move on and you don't really think about it, you don't take the time to write that out, you may have subconsciously learned something about writing, but without actually writing it out and breaking it down, you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to lay out what you've learned and consciously see the learning experience that you got from this book. So take the time to write out a book review. It can be bullet points. You don't have to post them. You can also post them if you want to, of course. It's a really simple way to get more out of what you're reading, and I think it's worth doing with every book that you read. Tip number 2, this might be painful for some people, but annotate your books. I never used to annotate my books. I liked my books to be pristine, but recently I've started annotating my books, and it's because of a handful of books that I read where after I read it, I was just like, man, I wish I'd annotated that because the writing was so good that I wish I'd marked up the passages that I wanted to return to and why I thought they were so excellent. I started to realize that annotating really helped my reading when I was in university, because I would do line edits on the stories that I was critiquing for the week, and I realized that I was getting so much more out of the stories that I was reading and critiquing for my peers than stories that I was just reading on my own time, you know? Like, I could read a story in a short story collection and feel like I didn't really take much away from it, and then I could read a story written by one of my peers for class and feel like I took away so much. And I think the reason is because I was annotating those stories and editing them physically with pen and paper, and I think that made me read the story so much more actively. You don't have to mark up every word, but just keeping a pencil nearby so that you can annotate your books. Or I think if you read on e-reader, I think a lot of e-reading apps allow you to highlight things and leave notes. Doing that will make you pay much closer attention to the line. And it also means that if there are passages that just really stand out to you as exemplary, you can easily find them again just by flipping through the book and see the notes that you made. So it's a really good way to make you pay more active attention to the line level in particular, if that's what you're looking to improve, by just actively annotating and marking up the books as you read. I know it can be kind of hard for some people who don't like to write in their books. Obviously you can't do that with a library book, but if you bought the book, you own the book, you can do whatever you like with it, and I think that annotating a book is kind of a way of showing the words care, not defacing it in any way, Tip number 3, break down a chapter, scene, or story. One really valuable exercise is to take a piece of writing that you think is really exemplary and literally just break it down. So let's say that you're trying to start a novel and you're kind of struggling with the novel opening. Find some novel openings, some first chapters in your genre that stand out to you as really effective, and literally break them down. Have a notebook open, have the chapter open, make a graph of all the scenes, write down where was the exposition, where were the character introductions, where were the descriptions, where was the dialogue, where was the inciting incident. Break down every scene and what happened in the scene and where the information reveals were, how the timeline was handled. You will learn so much, and you might be very surprised by what you see when you actually break down a really effective chapter or story into its components. Just writing out where was the description, where was the exposition, where was the narrative, where was the action, where was the dialogue. Really looking at the pacing and how all of the building blocks of a piece fit together to create this piece of writing. You can do this, of course, several times. With different pieces, but do this with writing that you think is really strong. You know, if you read a first chapter and it really grabs your attention and you felt like that was a fantastic first chapter, I wish I could do that. How do I do that? We'll break it down and look at all the gears, all the nuts and bolts that went into this chapter. And it'll really give you this very detailed understanding of the techniques that were applied and how you can apply that in your own work. So you can learn some very surprising lessons by seeing good writing in practice and breaking it down, rather than just studying what good writing is in theory and in the abstract. That's what I think is so beneficial about reading, and this exercise in particular. Sometimes what we're taught about writing isn't applied the way that we would necessarily think. And so actually seeing how a really good writer actually writes a chapter and how they use writing technique and really studying that can teach you some very surprising lessons that you wouldn't get just from studying writing craft. The next tip is to read or watch interviews with the author after finishing a book. This isn't going to be available for every book, but if you can find interviews with the author where they talk about the book that you just read, you can actually learn a lot from them. It can really help you get more out of what you read to listen to what the author was going for with their book and hear them talk about the themes and ideas and techniques that they were applying in their writing. Authors have very unique insight on their work. You know, an author can provide a perspective on their work that no one else can provide, obviously because they're the creator. It's one thing to read a book and try to see what the author was going for, and then it's another to then compare it to the author's word themselves and what they can tell you they were going for. You can really spot techniques that maybe were very subtle that you didn't spot initially when you hear the author explain what they were going for and what they were intending. Especially for your favorite authors, it can be a really beneficial practice to hear from them themselves, and what went into the creation of that work can be extremely insightful if you can find those interviews available. And finally, do buddy reads or join a book club. Having an opportunity to discuss and talk about the work that you read with someone else will help you get a lot more out of it than if you were just reading it on your own, because you can talk about your different experiences or your shared experiences reading the book, what you both got away from it. You can get a lot deeper into a book when you can bounce ideas and reading experiences off of someone else. You know, when you just have your own experience, you can read it and you're like, that was my experience, that's what I took away from it. But if you can say to another person, this is what I took away from that book, then they can say, okay, this is what I took away from it. And you can kind of bounce back and forth and find new nuances to a story that one person alone can't really find. It's a really good way to do deeper analysis of a book just through natural conversation. So doing buddy reads or joining a book club is a great way to get more out of your reading, especially if you do it with fellow writers, so you can really talk about the craft level and what you notice the authors were doing in terms of writing craft. So those are 5 ways that you can get more out of your reading as a writer and learn more from what you read. Reading is one of the most valuable ways to improve your writing. Just reading a book and not really thinking about it and moving on may not teach you as much as if you just take the time to, even if that's 15 minutes after you finish a book, to just really think about what you read and why it worked or didn't work for you. So that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Friday on this channel. Until next time, bye.